Good evening. My name is Emily, and I am with the Miami University Alumni Association. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our virtual wine tasting with Jack Keegan. Jack is an instructor emeritus who taught the ever-popular viticulture and enology class for 25 years at Miami and is in fact still teaching this semester with 180 students. Jack's wine class is always full, like I said. His chapter wine tastings are always well attended, and tonight is no exception as we have a lot of Miami alumni, friends, and family joining us. The Miami, where are we? There is an Ask a Question button located at the bottom of your screen, so feel free to put in any questions you have for Jack, and I will relay them to him. We also received some questions with registration that we will mix in throughout the night. And with that being said, go ahead and take it away, Jack.
Great. Thanks so much, Emily. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming on this beautiful night. In fact, I decided I would be outside among my plants on the deck again this evening. And actually, the nice thing is I have a solar stove, and so I've got this nice heat next to me. It really feels really very nice. So thank you all for coming. As you know, when we do this, in fact, let's see here. There we go. Simply French, a stroll through Bordeaux, is what we're doing this evening. And as you also know, when I do this, before we talk about anything else, we will in fact have a first wine. One thing you will see, of course, is this is the list of the wines and the that we will taste them in. And so the Domaine de Ferme Blanche, Bling, sparkling from Cassis, France, which is in the south of France, and then the Château from Bordeaux, a Blanc, and then of course the Crabitey, which is from Grave, also Bordeaux Blanc, and then two reds, Château de Arnaud, and then Château Bordeaux, which is from Côte de Blaye, and then finally a Sauterne. And so that's what we will be doing. The first wine we're going to be doing is Bling, which is in fact from Ferme Blanche. Ferme Blanche means the white farm. It's been around for a fair length of time. And so this, of course, is the wine, if you hopefully were able to get it. I will thank him later, but one of the things I wanted to mention too right away is all of these wines came through Kysela, Pere, Fils. Fran Kysela is a 1980 alum of Miami University, and he imports a tremendous amount of wine and sells in Ohio, in fact, many other states and online. And so I thought it would be fun, especially to do Bordeaux. Hopefully these wines were available for you to get. I always seem to have the most problem taking the metal off of it more than anything else when it comes to opening up a bottle of sparkling wine. And I will show you as usual how we do that once I get it off. It's really funny. You know, when I open any bottle of wine, I never take the entire capsule off. This is the capsule. And so in class, and it must have, I'm sure it has something to do with my age, I tell the class that I don't like to take all the capsule off because it makes the bottle look naked. And while I like seeing certain things that are naked, a bottle isn't one of them. And they're always like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that, kind of thing. So it's just sort of funny with this. So again, as you all know, here is the edge to, or the sort of the lip. I should get the name of this tab that comes down and you turn it down. And there's always 6 turns on this. So I always put my thumb of my non-dominant hand, I'm left-handed, on there. And so I turn it 6 times, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now it's open. I do that so that I have control over it. And then if it goes properly, you can see, in fact, it's starting to open up there. And so I bring it up all the way, hopefully very nicely, so that I just get a... And that's the right way to open a bottle of sparkling wine. The pop is nice, it is fun, but it can also be dangerous. This wine, pour some, has a nice head of bubbles to it. As you can see, in fact, it really is bubbling just beautifully there in the light there. And if we just smell this wine, you really don't have to swirl it at all because it is sparkling. Just so nice. You know, you're getting a nice sort of citrusy, a little bit of lemons, maybe some real nice apple there too. It also has a very sort of chalky minerality. Oh, just it's nice and inviting. It really, really nice that way. And of course, if you taste this wine, Mm. Now that's the way to spend a nice fall evening. Nice, has that chalky minerality, which is nice, so clean. A little bit of sort of stoniness that I keep getting, but then again, almost a little lemon curd in there, a little apple. So really, just a very nice wine with this. Um, I can tell you a little bit about this wine. Um, see if we see this. Thank you. It is, in fact, from the area around Provence. It is, in fact, from Cassis itself. And so you can see where that is in France. It is there at the bottom of the Rhone River. Here is a close up of the area. And so you see places like Côte de Provence, where we get a tremendous amount of rosés and a number of other things. And of course, if you look at the bottom, you will see very, very tiny Cassis. And by the way, Cassis, most of the wines from there are, in fact, whites and are just wonderful. It's one of those hidden gems in France that if you do know them, and they're not inexpensive, I would say $20 to $25 for a good one. You can find some really, really nice wines there in Cassis. This is, in fact, their vineyard, 74 acres rising above the sea, in fact, right near the town, as you can see right below there. So very, very just beautiful, beautiful area. This, in fact, is the winery. And you see some of the vineyards there in the picture. There, in fact, you see La Ferme Blanche, the doorway. Just a really, inviting exterior, a really sort of interesting place. There's a picture, in fact, around there. Of course, this area so touristic and not far from Cannes, not far from Nice, and so just beautiful right there overlooking the Mediterranean. So a wonderful place, in fact, to visit. This is really a very, very nice wine. Really, really good. And just the aroma is just so nice. And I'll be honest, I've had this wine once before because I tasted it a while ago. And now tonight, I don't know if it's the place or maybe the thing, but it's really so inviting, much more inviting than I remember it being, to tell you the truth. It has a nice depth of flavor. It really is just a lovely sparkling wine. Some little more about this. This, in fact, is a picture. Of course, you can see down that area, the lavender is so amazing with this. And so if you keep that there, this is 90% Sauvignon Blanc. It's 10% Claret. And there's actually a region in the south that's called Claret de Die. It's an ancient variety, losing acreage comparison to some of the other ones. But you see, 25-year-old vines, all organic, on clay and limestone. And they make this by what is called the method traditionnelle, meaning, of course, they make a wine, they then put it into the bottle with some yeast and sugar so that it actually has a second fermentation within that bottle, which is the same as the method champenoise, as they said. And then they let it sit for 22 months on the yeast. And that's what gives it that round, creamy character in the yeast. And in Champagne, legally, you have to just leave it for 15 months. Many people do it for a lot longer, but they only do it for 15 months. But this is, in fact, 22 months, which is really very nice. Also, amazingly dry. Residual sugar, that's what RS means, 4 grams per liter. I would say that many champagnes are probably in maybe the 8 to 10 grams per liter. And of course, if you have like an extra dry Prosecco, it'll be more like 15. And so this is a really, really dry wine and really nice. And the other wonderful thing, or it makes it really sort of very special, is they only make 600 cases of this wine. And so 7,200 bottles. So really not very much at all with it. And of course, it says X is an appetizer, also with seafood or fish. And so very, very nice with that. So yeah, it really is. It really is a lovely wine and something to sip on while we talk about the world of wine. Some things about it. According to the people in Champagne, 2022 is a blissful vintage. The question still remains, though. Are the grapes, do they have enough taste? We talk about climate change and all the time, and harvest throughout much of the world was, in fact, quite early. In fact, the earliest it has ever been in much of the world. And Champagne, after a really bad 2021, they are getting a lot of grapes. The question is, they really won't know, they feel, until the spring after they've made their first wine and it's had a chance to settle, to see if they can really feel that the quality is going to be there. So it's sort of fun, but they are certainly, of course, hopeful that that's in fact how it'll be. Interestingly enough, where so much of the world was warm, Oregon was very much behind. In fact, you'll see a picture later. My one of the Miamian is assistant winemaker out there in Oregon at Stoller, and he was saying, in fact, they had, I don't know, again, if you remember from in fact, the cherry crop was very strange because it actually snowed after the cherries flowered out there in Washington, Oregon. And so the grapes basically just sat there and thought, we're not growing. We're just not doing anything because it was so cold. And so they are, in fact, 2 weeks behind schedule. We were texting back and forth today. They've picked all their sparkling wine. In fact, they were working on Chardonnay today. I have a picture of that, in fact, later on to show you. The harvest in New York looks good also. And as I said, some of the earliest harvested ever in the world at that place. A few pictures. Here, of course, is in Champagne, and they are, in fact, busily harvesting. And as you can see, in fact, still in Champagne, most of them are done by hand. And so they are out there in the vineyards right now. Of course, it's night there now, but still at another time. Some other things happening. This was interesting, and I found out some stuff I didn't know. This is in fact made by it has the Coppola name, so Francis Ford Coppola, the very famous director who also owns Inglenook. Well, here I didn't realize, or just realized, that he is in a relationship with Delicato, which is a very, very big producer in California, and it seems like they make most of his entry-level wines, in other words, under Coppola. And what they've just come out with, in fact, is a Prosecco. As you can see, both a Prosecco and a Prosecco Rosé under the Francis Ford Coppola name. That should be out any day now with that. So that was sort of interesting to see that, in fact, just came out this week. Of course, Halloween is coming up, and in fact, they've done this for several years now. You can, of course, costume yourself as a box of Franzia. And there, of course, you see the red and the white that you can, of course, buy. And if I'm not mistaken, at least I know it did last year, it actually comes with a pouch so you can serve your friends at the same time while you're wearing the costume. Of course, it's called marketing. But speaking of marketing, they also came out this year with this. And of course, just the cutest puppy. And so you can, of course, outfit your dog in a Franzia costume for Halloween. And so that is also available there. I get no money from Franzia for telling you these things, but I just thought it's really fun and interesting to look at there. This also was a little crazy. Domaine, a very good champagne house, has actually designed the first bottle for space travel. And so this is meant to be, I don't know if it's meant to be drunk, but it's supposed to be under 0 G. I actually can't imagine opening a bottle of champagne in space. The bubbles would go everywhere, in the space station, etc. So I didn't sort of delve into if they ever expect that to happen, but they did in fact make that bottle for 0 G. And of course, we're going into fall, and of course it's Halloween, and of course all these other sort of silly seasons. And so another thing I have to tell you that's going on into the world of wine is this. Snoop Dogg just came out with a sparkling wine. And in fact, it's called Cali Gold. And as you can see, it is there. And in fact, there is the bottle. And just because I thought, and the things I do for you people, it really is sort of amazing. I decided that I would taste it so you wouldn't have to. So I went today and I bought a bottle of Snoop's Cali Gold. So I'm going to open this bottle. It, of course, is like every other with the 6 turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And, of course, open this up. Well, a little bit of a pop. And we'll try this. I thought, oh, why not? I just thought it would be so much fun to try this. It's extremely clear. So I guess it's a good thing. Very, very light color, as you can see. Has nice bubbles. So nothing wrong with that. And you can tell it's a California, at least I think, because it has a lot of fruit in the nose. No cannabis, by the way. Uh, a lot of fruit in the nose. It's really, you know, pleasant. So if y'all tried this wine, sweet. I will bet that the residual on this is at least 1.5%, 15 grams per liter. It is, in fact, very sweet, like an extra dry Prosecco. Nothing wrong with it. It would make a great mimosa. It really is nothing wrong with it, other than if you're paying like I think $16 or $18 for it. And so it's perfectly fine. And I don't know, it's it's okay. So I thought for educational purposes we would try some Snoop Dogg tonight. And so that's in fact what we have just done, for better or for worse. So it's sort of interesting to do. Let's look at the next slide. Let's see here. Yes, going back to France, we are going to Bordeaux, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight mostly. I'll get a little bit of a thing. You can sort of continue sort of tasting your wine. We'll be there with a white in a moment. But this is where Bordeaux is. It is down there, and in fact, I won't go into a lot of the history, but in fact, it was part of England for about 300 years. And so there's always been a strong English component to Bordeaux. Harvest, of course, is going on right now, and for the most part, not only been early, but the quality seems to have been pretty good. 2021 was a bad year everywhere. Lots of frost, lots of rain that caused lots of problems. This year was drought, and so the harvest, actually Spain was worse than France. The harvest has been lighter because of the amazing amount of drought, but otherwise not too bad. This is what Bordeaux looks like. You have this large estuary, in other words, a river that, of course, is arm of the sea, the Gironde, going out there. And so this is what it is. And so it is along the sea in that area. Again, a very complicated map showing you all of, there's like 57, if I'm not mistaken, different regions in Bordeaux. If you probably held a gun to my head, I could probably come up with maybe 30. But because there are, in fact, so many that are there, then we will talk about some of them, in fact, tonight. But you can see, and of course, the Gironde, which is the large blue, the river that comes down, and of course, it breaks down into two rivers, the Garonne and the Dordogne. And so you have a left bank and a right bank. And that's how we separate Bordeaux for the most part. You have a place in the between called the Entre-deux-Mers, where, in fact, a lot of really very nice wines come from. In fact, we're having some tonight with this. By the way, just so you do know, that area from Bordeaux, or where you see the colors, that green area that is over to the left actually is, I shut this off. Let me see if I can kill that. I can't kill my phone. I killed my phone. I didn't kill my computer. And so what you have here, that green area to the right is, in fact, where there were tremendous fires. Luckily, it did not affect the grapes at all, but in fact, it really was a real problem in all of that. So that, in fact, shows you where Bordeaux is. By the way, do the Bordelais like wine? If you go to the airport and you go to pick up your luggage, this is what you will see, in fact, at each one. This, of course, is luckily or unluckily empty bottle of Château Meunier. But this is, in fact, what you will see to show you, in fact, how important wine is to Bordeaux. The city itself is beautiful. Luckily, they've poured, millions of euros into it. And this, of course, is the cathedral. And it was, of course, a Roman town originally. Just absolutely wonderful. I mean, look at this. It is just, I did not take this picture, but just an absolutely beautiful city to visit. Wonderful food. And, of course, surrounded by vineyards and areas. And, of course, you can also visit the La Cité de Vin, the City of Wine. And this is a museum completely devoted to wine, very interactive. And it is right outside of the city. And so you can visit La Cité de Vin if you do go to Bordeaux. And it really is a beautiful city. We're going to talk about the whites first. And there are three grapes that are there. We won't have any Muscadel this evening, but we will have, in fact, Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon in there. But they all three are the important grapes in there. In fact, as you can see, and you'll think it's sort of a little complicated, Semillon has about 49%, Sauvignon Blanc 43%, only 6% Muscadel. In fact, it's only used 2 or 3% in many cases in the blend, because it's very aromatic, and so they will add it to the blend for aroma in many cases, and then a couple other minor grapes that are also there. Let's see if it's the right things. Wine number 2. What we're going to have next is, in fact, from Bordeaux, and you see it is a Blanc sec. It is Château Suau, and it is a white, and it is, as you probably saw, relatively inexpensive. It's really interesting. I look at all of these things very often, and to try to give you the most true information. And this actually happens to be the first time I've looked at the back label, and the back label now tells me differently than, in fact, I think I've seen. But regardless, I'm going to open this and we'll talk about it. It is a screw cap. Nothing wrong with screw caps, especially on a wine that you're not going to keep for years and years, as you will this wine. Beautiful, nice, pale straw, as we like to say. In fact, just a very pale yellow to that. Quite lovely wine. And if you swirl this wine and smell it, just really, you can tell that there's a lot of Sauvignon Blanc in this wine. It really has a lot of that sharpness, a little bit of green pepperiness to it. Really nice, sort of lemon lime again. Very, very nice. Has a little nice perfume to this wine also. Yes, and of course, if you taste this wine, that wonderful stony minerality. It is certainly dry. It's certainly refreshing, but right away, I think, with fish dishes, or even, going against even like a cream sauce or something like, pasta primavera or something like that, it would just be so tasty. And because it's just nice and fresh and clean, and really, really inviting. Mainly, as I said, lemon, citrus, that kind of flavors that are there, but has a nice depth to it, nice stony minerality. Really, very, very pretty little wine there. Let me tell you about a little bit, and then I will go to questions, Emily. Here, of course, is Château Suau. It is in Bordeaux. As you can see again, in this case, it is down near Cadillac. If you look at the bottom, or at the thing in sort of the yellow that is along the one river, I think I've got a close up here. Yes, in the red in this case, this is Cadillac. That's how they say that in France. And it is one of the côte wines, is what they call them. These are wines, in other words, from the hills around the center of Bordeaux. And actually, Cadillac is also known itself for sweet wines. Not like Sauternes that we'll talk about later, but in fact, they do make sweet wines in Cadillac, as they do in Lupiac also down there. But these are wines you rarely see. And so you see Côte de Castillon, Côte de Blanc in all of these areas. And so it's down here, not far from Grave. Grave means gravel. And in fact, it is an area where there are both a lot of whites and red wines that are made down here in this area. So most of these places make a white and they make a red. This, in fact, is the Château. Really sort of very lovely building. There you can see it from farther away. So a nice, lovely building where that they make it from. I thought that was a good picture of one of the turrets that are there. Here, of course, is the cellar. Also, because they do make reds, this probably sees no oak, but in fact, obviously their reds do. And so that's what you would see. Beautiful vineyards up there, sort of in the rolling hills. These are actually pictures from there. And obviously, they make reds. Well, I like this picture too because obviously the roses. Very often they would put roses at the end of the row because it gets the same disease that the grapes do. So if they started seeing the disease on the roses, they then knew it was time to spray the grapes. And so that's what you're seeing there on there. But I thought that was a nice picture that they had there. So another picture, in fact, of the vineyards there at Château Suau. 80% Sauvignon Blanc, 20% Semillon. So it is a blend, and most of the wines, the white Bordeaux, are blends of these two in different amounts. Organic. In fact, it's certified in there. As you can see, it's destemmed and sorted on a table. So, in fact, it's probably hand picked. Fermentation is in stainless steel, not surprisingly, at a low temperature. And then this is what gives the wine a little bit of creaminess. They put it on the yeast, the fine lees, for about 3 months. And as I said, seafood, grilled fish, of course, or an aperitif, which in fact we are having it right now together. Okay, I think that will do it. It got 90 points from the wine enthusiasts. So this vineyard in the hills above the Garonne River has produced a ripe wine, nutty and spicy. Also has a balanced perfumed fruit, rich and ready to drink, organic. And this, in fact, from the wine enthusiast, gave it 90 points. Okay. Any questions, Emily?
Yeah, we've had quite a few come in. So the first one is, I know that sparkling wines from Champagne are the only fizzies that can be called champagne. Fizzies from other areas are referred to as crémants. What is the difference between wines referred to as crémant and other sparkling wines from other regions, not champagne?
Well, in fact, and of course, it always does get confusing because in France they also talk about vin mousseux, which means sparkling wines, and so it's simply sparkling wines. In fact, it's sort of interesting, so it's funny how these things sort of pop in your brain. The word crémant was used in fact, I've seen like old pictures from like the late 1800s, early 20th century of wines from Champagne called crémant. But the word fell out of usage there and actually was picked up by the people in Alsace. And so the sparkling wines in Alsace are often called crémant more than any place else. And they make a lot of good sparkling wines there. By the way, they make good sparkling wines, as you saw. We just had from Cassis. They've actually increased, even though it's a small percentage, in Bordeaux. They make sparkling Burgundies. They make sparkling Loirs. And so you can find sparkling wines. Sparkling wine as a segment is one that has grown a fair amount in the last 5 or 7 years. People like, and of course, I like sparkling wines. And so it's fun to try them in the different ones and see what grapes are under. And so those are the differences. And they're absolutely correct. Champagne is a region. And in fact, I will tell you that you are going to see more and more still champagnes. In other words, these are be wines, table wines, that will have no bubbles in, that still, of course, will be called champagne because that's where it's from. And why? Because the climate is getting warmer, the grapes are getting riper. Champagne is a good example of making lemonade out of lemons. You have unripe grapes, and so what do? You do this, you do the second fermentation, you balance out the sugar, and so you have this incredible wine. And so that's what it is. But now, because it has been getting warmer, you can make very good Chardonnays, very good Pinot Noirs. And trust me, in the next few years, you will see more of them and they will be labeled champagne. Anything else?
So that was our only question specific to what we've covered so far. I have other questions, but they're more general. So I'll wait until then for this.
Okie dokie. That's fine, dear. Let's continue on. The next wine that we're having is also a white. This is Château Crabitey. And what you notice, as you may have noticed probably in the price, was that in fact it is from a specific region, which is Grave. Grave is the area, and I think I have a map next to. Grave is an area just south of the city of Bordeaux. North of Bordeaux, and in fact over on the right bank, they make almost all reds. In Grave, they make both reds and whites. The other thing that's interesting is, I think it was like in the 50s, the people in northern Graves basically said, hey, wait, we make better wine than the rest of you do. And by the way, unfortunately, they were telling the truth. And so there's two towns there in the north. One is called Pessac. The other is called Léognan. And so what they did was they actually carved out an AVA, a viticultural area, that is called that. And typically the very best wines from the Grave region, in fact, come from Pessac-Léognan in there. But this is in Graves itself, Château Crabitey. And again, I have not opened this so that you can see. I do this every time, but I think it never hurts to remember opening a bottle. As I said, I always use the cutter to take the top off like so. It's nice too. It has the year. Whoops, let me see if I can put that so you can see it right in front of my face probably. You can see the year 2019 that is there on that, and they very often will do that. I really like the double wing corkscrew, and so I put it at an angle so that I can get it right there in the middle, and then turn it around like so. So it's in the middle. I didn't do the best job I ever have because I'm up in the air like this, but I will put it in so far, and then of course put the first wing there and lift it up, and then the second wing, and out comes the cork. And so does it very, very nicely there. So let's pour this wine. Also, of course, the exact same color as the first wine, not surprisingly at all in that. And so let's swirl. Always so nice to look at and smell this wine. Oh, and right away, it has a depth, and actually, I mean, part of it is it's almost a grapiness. It's there's that apple aromas, there's the grapiness that's there. There's a depth of flavor. There's a roundness in the aroma, and there's more in this aroma than there was in the first wine. First wine's perfectly good. This wine has more character. Oh yeah, in fact, really comes out nice as it just when it begins to interact with the air. All of a sudden, this really nice perfume comes out of this wine. Oh, that's nice. Oh, gee. A little there's stoniness there. And of course, you taste this wine. The first thing I notice is it's richer. It's fuller in the mouth. You notice it a lot more. It has more weight than the first one did, not surprisingly. And has a really nice finish, really clean. Again, sort of apples and pears, really clean, round, a little bit of citrus, just really pleasant with a nice sort of weight to it, nice depth of flavor that really makes this very, very, very nice. Yes, a little bit of almost acacia flowers or honeysuckle. There's a really nice aroma there of a floral note also. Oh yeah, nice wine. So let me tell you a little bit about this wine. Go to the slides. Again, we're back in Bordeaux, and you see in the green at the bottom, we are in Grave. In fact, not very far from, the previous wine that was there in Cadillac, just a bit further to the north. In fact, this was a good picture for that, because you see, in fact, Château Lagrange, and in fact, you see Château Crabitey. It shows you exactly where it is in Grave, right there, very close to the river. So sort of very neat to see exactly where it is. It's a very interesting place because the building, which you can see, is quite large. And I've always noticed, how often, and I don't know if they're, it's not being used this way at all, but it was actually run by Franciscan nuns as an orphanage for a very, very long time. In fact, it was in the 1800s is when, in fact, this was found. It was bought, the land around it was bought in 1952. And in fact, these people then began developing the vineyards around it. And so this is what you have. And actually, the vineyard itself was first planted to supply money, obviously, to sell the grapes, to sell the wine, to support the orphanage. And so that, in fact, is the original reason for the vineyard to be there. So it's really sort of interesting to see. It's a lovely picture looking out across the vineyards there with a little bit of the a little bit of the rainbow there, looking across. This, of course, it shows you Crabitey, and of course, in the distance, the orphanage there. One thing I always notice about these pictures, if you look at it, do you see that all the shutters are closed? This happens so often, not only here, but in some very fine chateaus, because many of them, which I think is a sort of a sadness for many of them, don't. This one, of course, it's nice if they're not orphans and they're being taken care of somewhere else. But certainly, a lot of the places that used to be family run are no longer run, and so people don't live in many cases in the chateau that you will see in much of Bordeaux, which I think is a bit sad. There, you can see this wonderful gravelly soil that is there. Of course, they make red wine there too, which is why you see red grapes there. But again, this really nice, very well drained gravelly soil, and that's very important for grapes. It's to see, as you can see. This is also 80% Sauvignon Blanc and 20% Semillon, so the exact same amounts. In 19, it was a little different. And of course, they will change it from year to year. The vines are older, 80 years or 30 years old, excuse me. It is in fact a gravel, as I said, right near the river the Garonne. Here in this case, they left the grapes on. They basically put the grapes into the juice and let it sit for about 8 hours. And then what happened was, as you can see, they then pressed it. And in fact, they were very careful to keep the air out of it, as they're talking about with this. And then the fermentation, in part, French oak barrels. It's really interesting because I don't think, maybe a little bit of an oak note. It's not something that I would say right away, oh, I can really taste the oak in that wood. And so it really is, I think, beautifully integrated into it. And if I think about it, it's like, oh, okay, sure, maybe I can a bit, but it really goes very well with the wine itself. Cold fermentation, aged 6 months in French oak barrel, 20% new. Also on those fine lees, meaning that they leave the yeast there and they perform, as you can see, the word is bâtonnage, meaning that they use a bâton, meaning basically a stick, that they stir it up and do, in fact, for several months with this. They only made 1,000 cases of this wine, as you can see, and they say bisque, smoked fish, roasted chicken, and vegetables with fresh herbs. Oh, that's really a lovely wine. Really, really is. Very nice. Bordeaux's, white Bordeaux's, you can buy, trust me, there are very nice, and these are neither of them expensive, and very, very nice. You can find really nice everyday white Bordeaux's in the $15 range, and certainly 20, 25. But then, of course, there are white Bordeaux's that obviously will be much more expensive. A few become stratospheric, but in comparison to the reds, they are much less expensive, and you can find gorgeous examples in like $30 to $40, and of course absolutely wonderful ones $60 to $80, which in fact I've had a chance to taste a few times, and some really, really good producers like Malartic Lagravier, Smith Lafitte, and so they're really some great white Bordeaux producers. And I think it's one of the, most people don't think of Bordeaux as being white, and so you can find some great examples without breaking the bank, and it just goes very well with food and does very well as an aperitif. So a nice wine. Questions, Emily?
Yes, we have a couple. Okay. So this one says, how deep do vine roots have to grow in the gravelly Bordeaux soil? How do the characteristics of left bank and right bank wines differ?
Good question. Couple things. One, grapes are not heavy users of water. And the other things, it's a cliche, but I know I say it all, in the semester, probably 2 or 3 times. Grapes don't like wet feet, meaning that they do not like having their roots sitting in water. They will rot very easily. And a grapevine really only needs about 15 or so inches of rain a year, which is very low. I mean, here in Oxford, we get about 40. And so, in fact, and in Ohio, and in fact, in most of the East Coast, your best harvest, your best years will almost always be drought years, because there's less disease, there's less problems. Grapes also have the ability to put down very deep roots. In fact, the French did a study on terroir, in other words, place. And one of the things was, in fact, having it, you either have to have a deep soil that is very well drained, or if it's a shallower soil, there simply isn't a whole lot of that. There's not a lot of water they deal with, and still the drainage. This is why another thing I say all the time is that grape growing is a hillside phenomenon, because again, what happens? The excess water drains down the hill, and so that really makes a difference in there. The main difference between left bank and right bank, in fact, has a lot to do with soils, and we'll go into this a little bit when we talk about the red grapes. On the left bank, which is basically the Médoc region that we'll talk about, it has gravelly soils. And the thing about gravel that, in fact, you saw on those pictures is it drains. And so because it drains, it warms up easily, because water, it takes a lot of energy to warm up water. And so if dry gravel, it gets warm. And so that's a good place to grow Cabernet Sauvignon. And so your typical left bank wine, or especially in the north, will be, in fact, Cabernet rich. In fact, some of the best ones, in fact, will be 50, 60, 70% Cabernet in there. But of course, they grow Merlot, they grow Cabernet Franc, they grow other grapes too that they add to the blend. On the right bank, which is Pomerol, Saint-Emilion, etc., you tend to have more chalk soils. You have a little bit of gravel, but not a whole lot. There are parts of it, though, and a lot more clay. And so those grapes or those wines tend to be Merlot heavy. In fact, very much Merlot. In fact, one of the things you'll see is if you look at Bordeaux, often when we talk about Bordeaux, we talk about Cabernet Sauvignon. But the vast, vast majority of grapes that are grown in Bordeaux are Merlot. Merlot is by far the most widely grown grape there. And that's because it's easier to grow. It ripens earlier, and it's fruity and easy, even though, of course, some of the most expensive wines in the world are practically all Merlot, like Château Petrus. And so those are the big differences. When we think of left bank wines, we think of Cabernet heavy wines. When we think of right bank wines, we think of Merlot wines, even though they have a little Cabernet in it, typically a little more Cabernet Franc also. And of course, they have a little bit of either Malbec or Carmenère or Petit Verdot also. We're seeing more and more Petit Verdot because Petit Verdot takes a long growing season, and we have a longer growing season. And so same in California, by the way, Petit Verdot is going to be a grape that in fact is being planted more, and that's one of the reasons that is there. Other questions?
Yeah, one more for this. One is someone asked if you could say more about Stoller Wines in Oregon and its connection to a Miami alumni.
Well, Stoller, of course, is a winery there in the Willamette Valley. And in fact, well, you actually won't see a picture of him this time, but Evan Rose, who was, I never can keep track. I want to say a 2010 graduate. He had, of course, taken the wines class and, in fact, started working at Harmony Hills Vineyards, which is over in near Bethel, Ohio. At a very young age, did all kinds of work there and worked a number of other places. And so he is currently assistant winemaker at Stoller in Oregon and having a great time, I'm happy to report. And we're in contact. He's a dear friend. And so we're in contact fairly often with that. In fact, as I said, we were texting back and forth today. In fact, I have a video of them, in fact, stomping grapes. He was not, but it was their interns, their harvest interns, who were in fact stomping grapes today to add a little bit of skin contact, not their own skin, of course, but of the grapes, to the Chardonnay that they in fact were getting ready to do. So we've talked back and forth about that. So he is a dear friend and I think an excellent winemaker, and he is truly in his element being there at Stoller. So that's Evan.
Okay, and that's all for now.
Excellent. We will continue then. Let's see, where are we? We're going to talk about Bordeaux. You have to talk about red grapes in Bordeaux. And so I have a picture there of the 5 different, or actually, in this case, 6 different varieties. Some are so minor, but it is important to talk about. First and foremost, up in the upper right is Cabernet Sauvignon. Even though it's not the most widely planted grape, it certainly has a lot of the notoriety when it comes to grapes. But there is certainly no question that the one on the sort of middle left, Merlot, is by far the one that's planted most often. Cabernet Franc, which, by the way, you find a lot of Cabernet Franc here in Ohio because it's a fairly cold-tolerant grape, also adds a spicy thing to the profile. Remember, almost all Bordeaux's are blends. And so you will often find those three grapes in it. Then, of course, you have three others that are found in very, very small amounts. Carmenere and Malbec, not very much. Carmenere, of course, has found its place to a great extent in Chile. And so there's a lot of Carmenere grown in Chile now. Petit Verdot, I'm seeing a lot more Petit Verdot in various places. But it's still grown in a fairly small amount in Bordeaux. And then finally, in the middle is Malbec, which, again, is sort of interesting, has found its place in Argentina. And so Argentine Malbecs are very highly priced and are really wonderful. But those have all, in fact, originated in Bordeaux, and that, in fact, is where they mostly are from. As you can see here, Merlot 66%, Cabernet 22.5%, Cabernet Franc 9.5%, and then the other three are only 2%. This, of course, is from, in fact, the Bordeaux wine producers in there. And they say why. Early ripening, high alcohol, supple, round, and aromatic. And so it makes it an easy drinking wine. Cabernet, of course, late ripening, much, much more tannic. So it needs a lot more barrel aging, aging in the bottle, all of those things. And, of course, are very often blended with that. And then, of course, Cabernet Franc, also high alcohol, but very elegant tannins. In fact, I like Cabernet Franc, in fact, very, very much, and Petit Verdot for that matter. But those, in fact, are the red grape varieties in Bordeaux. The wine that we're going to have next is Château Arnaud's. As you can see, it is simply called a Bordeaux, which means the grapes can, even though they can come from a very specific place, they can come from anywhere, and so can be a blend of wines. And so I've already opened this one. And so it's Bordeaux, and it's, of course, very young, 2021. And, of course, if you look at this wine, and I can try to sort of catch the light as much as possible, it is, in fact, a beautiful red, fairly dark. You can see through it a bit because I would expect that. Whoa. And the aroma. I mean, you don't have to do anything to this. It's like, oh, it's here. I mean, it's just already jumping right out of the glass in that very, very typical, the aroma is very typical Bordeaux style. So beautiful, beautiful red color. Very, very clear. And of course, if you swirl and smell this wine, yeah, Bordeaux. It's plums. It's black cherry. It's a little of that cassis, but there's also then too a little bit of that cedariness to it. And this wine probably saw little to no oak, but it's still there simply because of the grapes. And by the way, this wine is Merlot. I'm almost positive this is 100% Merlot, which of course is widely grown. And this is a beautiful example of Merlot. It has that wonderful plush perfume that comes out of this wine. Oh yeah. And this is a perfect example. I mean, this is a wine that you can easily use, especially this time of year, as an aperitif. I mean, it really is. You can tell it's bright, it's plush, really very nice. And of course, if you taste this wine, seriously, what's not to like? It's not heavy. It has really nice fruit. It is certainly dry. There are tannins there, but they're not overbearing. And so you could actually, but I mean, even with some light appetizers or, and John Dome, who of course taught the wines class for so many years, would talk about pizza hamburger wines. And right away, it's like, this would be wonderful with hamburgers. Again, a good hamburger. But you would have no problem because it's medium bodied. It would stand up to the beef or something along those lines without any difficulty at all. And yet it would not overpower it. And so because it's nice, medium bodied, just really, really tasty, good acidity, just that little bit of tannin in the finish. I mean, seriously, what's not to like? I mean, it really is just a lovely little Bordeaux. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Just sort of, plummy, some cassis, blackberry. Oh, yeah. Wow. So nice. And, yeah. And this is not, I left Sandra Boscaini, who runs Mazzi, who talks about some wines like Amarone being wines of contemplation. No, this is a wine to enjoy. This is a wine to drink. This is, and that's what it's for. And it does a very, very nice job of that. A little bit about this wine. Let's see, we'll continue. This is, of course, Château d'Arnaud, a very, modest building. That's the whole thing. Certainly when I think of a chateau, I think of, yes, the beautiful big ones, things like, Léoville Lascasse or something like that, but it's just, beautiful buildings. But a chateau, I mean, sometimes there's not even a building on the vineyard, and it still, of course, has the chateau name. Wonderful, you can see relatively flat. You're in, I think, the Entre deux Mers. You're on the other side, and so of course it's relatively flat, but you can see all the grapes that are there. This is a picture actually out of wine.com of the grapes as they are turning in there. This was actually started in the 50s, and it was started actually, in fact, now this company, these people own a number of acres. But they only started with like 5 or 7. In fact, originally at Chateau Arnaud, and then it was the grandfather, and then the son bought more acreage, and in fact bought a couple other properties, and then now the grandson also, in fact, deals with the wine. In fact, he's basically the winemaker now, and they have added to their property, and so they actually have and several different properties, in fact, that are all under, I think it's under Les Combes. It's under sort of the one heading, but this was, in fact, the first property that they did own there. This, of course, is as you can see, the stainless steel vats that are there for the vinification. I had to add this, though. There's also a place called Château that's called like Grand Arnaud, which looks like a wonderful place to go and to visit in Bordeaux while you're looking at the winery. I thought, I have to add that. This is a nice pool. Looks like a really good place to sort of, chill out in between visiting wineries. Same name. So it's like, had to add that one to that. Some things about the wine, of course, it is red. It's 100% Merlot, as I mentioned. Relatively, vines that are getting sort of at their prime at 30 years. Sustainable thing, a gravel soil, not surprising there. They talk about, again, having good sun exposure, warmth, and humidity. It's only vatted for 3 or 4 weeks, then bottled 18 months of aging in vat. So in other words, this probably sees little to no oak when they're talking about vats. And so you're really only getting the tannins from the grapes themselves. But really, lovely little wine. Really very, very nice. Yeah, yes. What Bordeaux should be. Questions, Emily?
Yes, sorry, I couldn't get my mouse over there.
Okay. It got 88 points in the wine enthusiast. And so, we'll bring that up at the end. It got 88 points. Again, it really is. It's a really lovely little wine. So,
okay, our question is: were some of the Bordeaux red grapes not replanted in France after phylloxera?
Phylloxera.
And was there a misidentification of Carmenere as Merlot in Chile, and why?
Oh, very good. Question. Ooh, yes. The planting was changed because phylloxera hit. Phylloxera, of course, is a root louse. It's a vector insect. And, if you walk out, and in fact, as I do, I show the students all the time, if you walk out into the woods here in Oxford and you find the wild grapevines, I can guarantee you are going to find these little galls on the new leaves, and that's phylloxera. Phylloxera is a little root louse. It lives in the roots, but also has a foliar form that lives in the roots. And what it does is it makes their own little houses on the leaves that are these thickenings, and so they're inside of that. The foliar form, and actually our grapes are not bothered by it. Sure, they're bothered some, but this is the end of the growing season, and so it's not hurting the photosynthesis, and they don't really chomp on the roots a whole lot. So our grapes basically shrug them off. They live with them. Well, unfortunately, it's like emerald ash borer. Everyone's all worried about God, I've forgotten the name of the other stupid insect that's coming now. That so many things like this that we've had problems with, chestnut blight, etc., that came from other countries. Well, we have also given our problems to other countries, and phylloxera was one of them. It is native to Eastern North America, and in fact, it was taken to France. Well, the European wine grape, Vitis vinifera, was not had no resistance to this at all, and so the vineyards in France began to die. And obviously, if you think now, grapes are worth billions of dollars in France, but then, and it was the livelihood of so many people, it probably was trillions of dollars that, in fact, it really caused, in fact, a major upheaval in the economy of France when it hit. And it took them a long time to finish. You have to graft to change that. And so, yes, it's very true that when they began doing that, they did in a number of areas change the grape varieties that were there previously. Frost has also had a problem that way, and or severe cold, etc. There was a tremendous freeze, in fact, in Bordeaux in '56, and so these are things that happen that, in fact, then cause grape changes. Carmenere, as in fact the person mentioned, and in fact it's very true, it was thought to be Merlot, and it is widely planted in Chile, and then finally an ampelographer, to give them their right term. This is a person who really knows grapes by looking at the leaves and all the other portions of the vine. He went to Chile and said, sorry, a lot of these are not Merlot. What you have is Carmenere. And they didn't really come to that realization until then. And it still continues to catch on. And so Carmenere is, in fact, one of the better, makes a really nice, spicy red that you can get from Chile. So that's what it is now.
Okay, and that's our only one specific to this.
Okay, well then we will change wines. As I mentioned, and I guess I'll go back, this wine got 88 points from the thing on the right bank of Bordeaux, close to Lussac Saint-Emilion, which of course is all the way over there near Saint-Emilion, because 100% Merlot. Ripe Merlot dominated wine. In fact, it's all Merlot. Juicy black fruits, richness, warm, generous, and will be ready for late 2020. So we're more in. And that's a good question. I have no question. Here it is now, late 2022. This wine will probably be perfectly fine for at least the next 2 years. I'm not worried about it sort of losing itself or anything like this, but it's not really there for the super long term. But reds, especially, 1 to 3 years at least, and this is certainly good for another couple of years. The next wine we're doing is Château Bordeaux. It, of course, is a red, and this, in fact, is from one of those coats, which is from Bly. As you see, Bly coats to Bly. And it's interesting. All of these places, the history is always so fascinating, because Bly, in fact, at one point in time was really, really known for its fine wine, as, for example, was Fonsac. And, 150 years ago, these wines were making wine on par with the very best that you could find there. But because of phylloxera, that had a lot to do with it. They, that they did not replant much of these areas, and so it did not. But there really are some great properties with really great terroir. In other words, really good sun exposure, really good drainage, all of those that can make really nice wines, but they don't have the cachet. And so consequently, you don't pay as much as you do for the big names in the big areas. It's like with everything. So let's try this Château Bordeaux. Pour to the side. And I'll bring that out. And actually, still, very nice and red. I'd say a little darker in color, but not a whole lot. And so you can certainly see through it. And I will swirl this wine. A little darker, has a little bit of garnet highlights. Oh, yeah, but deeper, richer, darker, more cassis, elderberries. Just that, really darker aromas to this wine. Very rich, a little violet. Actually, too, that's sort of really interesting. If you have a Queen de Violette, it really has that sort of violet aroma to it. Ooh, so pretty. And you are getting some wood notes out of this. Yum. So if you taste this wine, yes, richer, rounder, more tannin, uh, bigger, just in so many ways with this. Nice fruit, and actually a little young. I mean, I could see letting this sit for a year or two, where it would even open up and soften up a little more because you got some good grippy tannins there that, in fact, are very nice. And this is the thing. Now, this may be a wine that you might let in a decanter or open for a little bit because the air will soften that up. But at the same time, if you're having here for having a steak or grilled vegetables or something that has that, it would stand out very, very nicely, in fact, to that wine with that. So you really very, very pretty. Yeah, yeah, that's a keeper. Yeah, and I could certainly see having that. And of course, as I said, look back, it's 19. Yeah, and this will be wonderful through 2025 or longer. I think without any question at all. I can share a little bit about this wine. Um, let's see, we're going back to, of course, it's in Bly, as you can see, that large red area that's in the upper part of that map. So over there, sort of on the right bank, but certainly far from the sort of the trendy area or the pricey areas that are there, but very, very nice. This, of course, is the property. In fact, very lovely property there with, gardens, etc., around it. Beautiful vineyards, again, looking out at the Gironde, that estuary that is there, which probably, in fact, helps to prevent frost, also probably helps to prevent hail, and so has other good things other than its looks. This in fact, the property was bought in 1993. I think it's very interesting, and I couldn't delve into it any further. But first thing, of course, I look at this very French name of Schweitzer. But in fact, it says when I read about the property that he did not own it. He did not buy it until 1993. But he walked past this property as a child and noticed the gravel that was there and bought it in 1993. And now he shares the work, as you can see, with his two sons, Richard and Ludovic. And so they are, in fact, again, it wasn't something I could easily show you, but if you do go onto their website, there's a very nice, like minute and a half small video of the area, etc. And so this is, in fact, the owners of Chateau Bordeaux. And they really are doing a very nice job, the three of them, in fact, to put these wines together. As you can see, it is Côte de Bordeaux. It is Bly, AOC. This wine is 87 Merlot, so it does have 10% Cabernet Sauvignon, which I think adds to the depth of it, and 3% Cabernet Franc. Fairly, vines, of course, of an age, 25 years old. Again, you don't have to worry about the double Guillot pruning. And about some of the things they do, but they do green harvest, so they do keep the yields quite low. And they talk about some of the other things they do in the vineyard, but they harvest at optimal maturity. They're sorting the grapes during harvest and upon arrival, so they do have a sorting table. As I said, they actually have a long time where the grapes stay in the wine as it's fermenting, and afterwards, a long maceration. You can see 3 to 4 weeks. Color and tannins, they do punching down and pumping over, as it says. Everything is done at a warm temperature, 26 to 28 degrees, so it's up into the 80s with that to get a good extraction in there. And they make, as you see, a fair amount, almost 30,000 cases of this wine. And for the most part, this also sees very, very little wood. And actually sort of surprising. It says, stainless steel tanks is racked before bottling a number of times. And of course, they say having it with Magrette Canade, duck breast, or a fillet of beef. And I could not agree more. It really was a wine that goes with, in fact, fairly strong food. Though both fillet and duck are not super heavy foods and would go very well with it. Just reminds me, it's been a while since I've had duck. 'Cause the duck breast is one of my favorites. Really lovely wine. Really, really lovely wine. Questions, Emily? Oh, I think I
Yeah.
have some. Excuse me. I'm saying, it, in fact, got in 2020. It got from Decanter, Platinum Award, flamboyant and deep, ample, lush, fresh forest fruits, bramble, cassis, cascading free spice, swiftly following a super brooding wine, which will shine brighter with time. Which I could not agree. Lovely right now. Give it a couple years, and it will. It is already a winner, and it will be a keeper for a few years with that. So it got a platinum medal, in fact, from Decanter, and 97 points. Decanter being the English wine magazine. Sorry, Emily. Now,
Yeah, that's okay. So a comment, Andrew, and I don't know if this is your friend Andrew, but maybe you'll know. It says in 2000 he had a summer job delivering wines to upscale Cleveland grocery stores. Although he wasn't 21 yet, after his boss sampled new bottles of wine, he would take them home with him. He says his question is, can you think of a better summer job?
no. Actually, for the most part, that's true. Especially, boy, at that age. And no, I do not know this Andrew. At least, thing. But yeah, um, I, you know, I talk about this in class a lot, and it is interesting how we treat, and I certainly don't want to say this lightly at all, because it is. I live in Oxford. I know what alcohol can do when it is abused, but the way we treat alcohol in this country is sometimes hilarious. I mean, for example, as I was getting ready for class, or as I was getting ready to do this um, presentation, in many cases, when I would go to uh, to visit a website, well, they would make me say that I was 21. It's like, I can't drink the wine through my computer. So what difference does it make if I am? Not to mention, I can't imagine many 14-year-olds on there trying to figure out about how to get good wine. And I'm not even trying to get the wine. All I'm doing is looking for information. So it is odd. And of course, and America is unique in so many ways in its handling of alcohol and what we do and don't do and everything like that. And it is sometimes, in fact, it's no, not sometimes. It is usually mystifying. I do not understand that. But again, the wines he was taking home, and if he was under 21, he was actually doing something that in fact was illegal. And that's how it works with us. Where I've always felt that with anything, if you educate people in the proper handling of anything, that they are better for it. But we don't tend to do that. So I'll stop there.
Okay, so he said I left out what the type of wine it was, and I only did that because I couldn't pronounce it, if I'm being honest with you. But he said Kysela Pere
Oh, Kysela?
Kysela.
Kysela
Yeah.
Pere Feast. That's right. Because
Yes. So he said that was the main part of the story, and I did leave it out because I wasn't sure how to pronounce it.
Yeah, because Fran Kysela, who is in fact, he got into wine because of his father. That's the Pere part that is there, and so that's what he did. And in fact, Fran is from Cleveland. Their main place is now in Virginia, but he in fact is from Cleveland, and so that's probably in fact who he was working for, was in fact Kysela at that point in time. Yeah. And Fran.
So that was a big part of this. So
Sure,
I think that was a big part of the story of
that's right.
After his boss sampled it, he took it home. Okay. So a question about the Bordeaux though. Where does the Premier Cru and Grand Cru come into the Bordeaux classifications?
Actually, and I know it is confusing, and I feel badly. For the most part, it doesn't. What you find in Burgundy is you have Grand Cru vineyards, of which there are 32, if I remember rightly. And then there are hundreds of Premier Cru vineyards, which are right underneath there. And then, of course, but there are villages, etc. In Bordeaux, what happened was, I'll drop one back. In 1851, Prince Albert, who was, of course, was married to Queen Victoria, had a grand exposition in 1851, and it was a huge success. And so in 1855, Louis Napoleon III decided that he was going to have one too. And so he told the people in Bordeaux, I want a list of your best wines. And he told the town council this, and they didn't want to do it. So they basically threw it off to like the Chamber of Commerce. And the Chamber of Commerce didn't want to do it either. And they wrote back to the French government and said, we don't want to do this. And the French government wrote back and said, nah, you're going to do it. And so they did. And what they did was they broke off what was then the top 61 properties, Château, into 5 different groups. And so instead of having Premier Cru or Grand Cru, Premier Cru, it is first growth, in other words, Premier Cru, and then Deuxième Cru, Troisième Cru. Now I've got to count in French. Quatorzième Cru and Cinquième Cru. In other words, the first 5. They broke into 5 different groups, and those wines. And basically, what they did was they told the French government, "Oh, by the way, this is a snapshot. This is only what it is like right now." But yet we still follow that 1855 classification. So there's really not a Grand Cru, Premier Cru in Bordeaux. It is those 5 and then everybody underneath. And there's still some wines that are not in there that make wine of certainly quality and value in many cases. But that's what you have in Bordeaux is those top 61 chateaux, which in fact are very well known. And in fact, all of those were in the Médoc. In other words, up there north of Bordeaux. The only one that was added was Château Aubryon, which was south, but it was already so famous they had to add it. So consequently, all the poor people on the right bank, they weren't in it at all. And yet today, things like Château Petrus, Château Lapine, Château Pavie, etc., get the same prices, but they were not part of that classification. And so, and now the people over there, they have their own classification, but people don't pay as much attention to it, but they do know what the expensive and good wines are. And like, in fact, so many Bordeaux, the top ones can be over $1,000 a bottle. It's like, whoa, just crazy. Anything else?
Nope, that's it for now, but we have more questions. I'll just save them.
Okay, that's fine. We will then move on. By the way, as you saw that, let's see here. Our last wine. And it's really, I'm really, really pleased. Actually, I'm very, very pleased. As I said, I've already thanked Fran once, and I certainly will again at the end. But the problem with Bordeaux is that, let me put it this way. For example, if you are, let's say Gallo or Mondavi or something like that in California, and of course, most of the rest of the world, you sell your wine to a distributor here, Heidelberg, Ohio Valley, Cutting Edge, something like that here in Ohio. And they then distribute it. So then if you come into the market, as they do, to basically promote your wines and have wine tastings, etc., you then know who sold a lot of your wines, who are really into your wines and who did it. Bordeaux's not that way. In Bordeaux, the chateau, in other words, the wineries, they sell to someone called the négociant. And the négociant, you hear the word negotiate there. The négociant then sells the wine to the rest of the world. And for the most part, the winery owners have no idea where their wine goes. They know it goes to the négociant, but they don't know who the négociant sells to. And so, and the problem ends up being is then you never know where it goes and what's there. So this has really been very nice for me because I could highlight Bordeaux. And for the most part, I can't because what is available in Ohio isn't available in other states or even in parts of Ohio. And by doing this and with timeless wines, I could actually know that I could do all of this. So I would never dream of doing a Sauterne, in any other class. And so this is what makes it very nice. Sorry to go into that a bit, but it really is nice for everyone to taste these wines because Bordeaux makes great wines. But to try to do a class this way is difficult, if not nigh impossible with this. So let's have this last wine. And this is Château Gravas, and it is a Sauterne, which is in fact very, very special in so many ways. It's one of those things. I do a Sauterne every semester in class. And it's because I really think that it's very nice to do so. Also, in my opinion, and it's gotten a little better, but Sauternes are one of those really unsung wines because everyone says, "Oh, I don't like sweet wines." But yet every time I say this in class, it's like, "Oh," so many of the students like, "Oh, this is really, really good." That's because it is really, really good, and just because it's sweet doesn't mean that you automatically sort of, you ignore it or, don't in fact enjoy what it is. Okay. So this is in fact Chateau Gravas, and it is a Sauterne, and it is a bit more golden in color, and we'll see as to why. Sort of beautiful color. And if you swirl and smell this wine, it's just, you know, if it isn't obvious, I love Sauternes. I mean, smell that. It's it's pineapple. It's grilled pineapple. It's honey. It's flowers. I mean, what's not to like? It just has all of that going on. It's a little touch of the brown sugar brioche. Ah, so nice. Really, really is. And it has all of those, just that incredible panoply of beautiful, beautiful aromas. And of course, you taste this wine. The thing about it, of course, it's sweet. It is sweet, no question. But two things going on with it. A, it's got great acid. So it balances the sweetness beautifully. The other thing, it has that very sort of distinctive sort of apricot, almost like a dried apricot of flavor and aroma that is typical, in fact, of the way these grapes are, because these grapes have been infected with botrytis, which is a fungi which attacks the grape. And what it does is it takes a lot of the water and some of the sugar, but it gives this peachy apricot, what I think of dried fruit component to the wine. And so ends up being very, very important. These are used very often as an aperitif, in other words, before dinner, often used for dessert. And I for one, am not a person who does a lot of it's really tough to match desserts. I would, maybe a pear dessert. The other thing, I look at this and say, things like blue cheese, if you like it, things like almonds or pecans are very nice with it. Maybe like a pear, something. It's very hard to match sweetness. So very often savoriness goes much better. Again, and I understand why people do not do this, but it is one of the classic pairings. Is this with foie gras, which of course is goose liver, and it's that richness that goes against the sweetness that make an amazing pairing of the two. Yeah, it's just that honeyed component, the pineapple, just everything that's in that wine. And again, that dried fruit characteristic. This is Sauterne. A bit about this wine. As you can see, we are now back obviously in Bordeaux, all the way to the south. You can see among the orange, you see Sauterne and Barsac. Those are the two areas. And what happens is, it's not on this map, but you will see that there's another small river that comes into the Garonne there that's called the Ciron, Ciron. You don't need to know that. But what happens is, as it happens, in fact, in any river town, is when you get to September, October, what normally happens is in the valleys, you have fog. And so you'll have a cool morning, and it'll be foggy. And then, of course, the fog burns off. And very often you may have a long period of time, like we are, in fact, in Oxford the next couple of weeks, of nice sunny weather. And so you go from fog to sun, fog to sun. Well, when it's foggy, the fungi grows, but it's stopped by the sun. So what happens is it pulls out the water and takes a little bit of sugar, but what it does is it concentrates the sugar into those really, grapes that are, I mean, let's be honest, rotten. They look rotten. I have a picture coming up with this. And so these are the wines, and these wines have always thought to be, I mean, basically the wines of kings. Château is the most famous of all of them, but I think of Rio Sec, I think of Sudero. I mean, there's such amazing wines made in this manner. By the way, Tokai, one of the most famous wine for the most part from Hungary, is in fact made also from grapes that are infected with botrytis. This is Chateau Grava. Grava is basically because of the gravel, because it's well-drained soils that are there. This, of course, is another picture of the chateau, of the house. It is owned. In fact, they've owned it for a fair length of time. It was originally started in the 1850s. This is now the sixth generation since about 1900 that, in fact, do own and run this Chateau Gravas. In there, there's another picture, of course, of the vineyards that are there. And look at these. I always think about. And it really is a lot easier. You look at those grapes and think, who'd ever think about making wine out of that? But the reason, of course, it's that way is because, remember, these people were poor and they didn't know. So even though the grapes were funky, they still tried to make wine. And all of a sudden it's like, well, this is nice. And so that, of course, is what you ended up having in this. And so this is what botrytis infected grapes look like. The other thing that's really interesting about this, and there's so many things, and in fact, one thing I always think about is like these wines should be so much more expensive than they are because they're more difficult to make. And one of them is if I'm going to make a Chardonnay, I'm going to make a Cabernet, any of the wines that we've talked about already, what am I going to do? I'm going to very closely monitor the ripeness, and when the grapes are ripe, I'm going to pick them all. That's not how this works. In these wines, what you do is if the botrytis begins to affect, you will then go through the vineyard and you will pick the botrytis infected grapes. And then if the weather holds out, in 3 or 4 days, you may go through and pick the botrytis infected grapes that have since come on. And in 3 or 4 days, you will go pick the botrytis infected grapes again. And it's not unheard of to make like 7 or to 10 passes through the vineyard, depending on the weather, because if it's going to rain, these grapes are mush. And so you pick whatever you can, and then that's that. So it's really a question of the weather. So this is how, in fact, so it's more expensive. I laugh, of course, sort of being the age I am. They do hire a lot of retirees who have the time to go out for a couple of hours and pick the grapes, and then they can come back in a day or two and do it all over again. And so that, in fact, is one of the things that they do in that. Again, appellation, Sauterne. This wine is 100% Semillon, though I have said, in fact, actually, I'm looking to see, I should have looked. Of course, it doesn't say anything on the back. I have seen other places, and of course, it may be 95% Semillon, 5% Sauvignon Blanc, limestone and clay, completely stainless steel, but aged in French oak for 18 months. In fact, most Sauternes are, in fact, aged in oak. And of course, they say the wine pairs well with white meat, scallops, exotic and spicy dishes, foie gras, Roquefort blue cheese, and chocolate desserts. Again, be careful with your sugar in all of that. Okay. And again, here it is. In fact, this is actually older. The 15 Gravas. These, of course, 18 outstanding Sauternes Textbook, wonderful. Jeb Dunnick at that point gave it 90, 89 points. I could not find anything else for this, but this is a lovely, lovely and very typical Sauterne. You'll find some that have more depth, but still, it's a good classic example of Sauterne. Okay. Questions, Emily? Oh, it's really, I can't think that aroma. It's sort of floral, but it's almost a little bit, it's soapy and flowery. It really is just sort of amazing.
Yeah, we do have some questions.
Sure.
This one I think was referring to one of the past wines, and I missed that, so I'm sorry. But it says, is Cassis a black currant flavor in the wine? She said she's heard of a liquor Cassis.
Exactly. Very, very good. In fact, it's actually, and this is all, it's always a problem, and we do laugh because, you have all of these things. For example, in California, and they have now very nicely and very, I think, very not only smart, but I think very adult, decide to agree and disagree because there's a Stag's Leap STAG apostrophe S, and there's a Stag's Leap STAG apostrophe. And that's the only difference between the two. And they that were in court, but they finally decided it's like, oh, people will figure it out. And they do. And I was laughing, in fact, actually in getting ready for this class, because there is a Château Bordeaux, there's a Château de Bordeaux, there's a Château Le Bordeaux. It's like, oh, great. It's like trying to figure out what that I'm telling you, in fact, the truth. Cassis is another perfect example. Cassis is a black currant liqueur. And so you can buy creme de cassis, and I do, because they grow a lot of it in Burgundy. And in Burgundy, in fact, you can go visit, as I did in 17, a cassisarium, a place where they make cassis, and it's made, in fact, from the black currants. And it's used to make a kir, K-I-R, which is using a white wine. In Burgundy, they use aligoté, which is the grape, and they add a little bit to it to sort of give it the flavor and spice, etc. At the same time, Cassis is, in fact, Cassis is the town down there in France, and there they make white wines. And so you have the white wine Cassis, and you have the black currant liqueur Cassis. It's, the exact same word, said the same way, etc. So that's what happens.
Okay. And then just a couple more for the evening, because I know we're getting close to our time here. So somebody wants to know how you pick wines, not just for tonight, but like at any point that you want to drink wines. Do you keep like a list of all of your favorites and then go back to those? Are you trying new ones?
You mean for these, or as just I'm drinking?
No, just in general.
Okay, in general. Look up Peter Lask. Send him an email and tell him to get his dog in the house. Can you hear the dog, by the way? It's driving me crazy. Anyway, in general, in fact, it is funny because people always ask me if 1416. People always ask me, it's like, do you drink, one wine over and over again? And I will tell you very truthfully, no. I really enjoy wine for the incredible variation that is out there. And so because of that variation, I really, I try all kinds of wines all the time. And I really don't, and I may buy, of course, when I buy wine, sometimes I'll buy it by the case, but I don't say, oh yeah, this is what I drink all the time. There's nothing I drink all the time. I mean, I like sparkling wines. And for example, WTSO has a wine that is called Philip Pere. It is a champagne that's now up to about $25 a bottle. And I will buy that very often and I will have it. But I drink other sparkling wines and champagnes too. So yeah, because I'm always interested in trying something new. I mean, for example, I don't mind telling you, I was at Jungle Jim's this morning because I'm going to be making paella tomorrow. And so I went to get some stuff for that, the rice and other things. And so while I was there, I looked around to see what they have. And there was a really interesting rosé I've never had before. And then there was a blend of like 5 grapes from Portugal, which I'd never had. So of course, I'm having those. So I bought a bottle of that. And so, because that's what's fun about wine, trying all the various wines that are out there that make it fun.
Okay, let's add one. Let's do one more, and I'll kind of make it a twofer.
Sure.
So, what is your favorite wine region? And then for tonight, someone said that they picked up all 6 wines. They didn't want to open all 6 bottles. So, what was your favorite wine from tonight? And then also, while I'm at it, I wanted to say, Rick Sommer, class of 62, said, why don't we franchise a line of Jack Keegan wine bars nationwide?
Well, I mean, if he wants to bankroll me, we can see what we can do.
Yeah, well, that's why I gave you his name. You can reach out to him. Okay, but the questions were, what is your favorite wine region? And then what was your favorite wine from tonight?
Yeah.
And those will be the questions we end on.
Sure. And I sort of feel badly about that because I don't think I have a favorite wine region. I mean, there are certain places, and in fact, it's funny. I mean, Emily and I were talking earlier. I mean, would I be like thrilled to go back to most of Italy, Alsace? And so wine is so, I don't know, and international is not the word. What I'm looking for, there's sort of a commonality, and of course, what people make and do in wine that makes it interesting from all over the place. That makes it sort of really fun to try from different places. And so, yes. Do I like California wines? I like Oregon wines. I like Burgundies. I love Champagne. I could go on and on and on. In fact, we would run out of time by the time. And so I don't really think I have a favorite place. They're just wines I like. And so that really is, in fact, part of what goes on with that. And you know what, in fact, it is. And my favorite wine for the night, that's tough. I mean, because, I picked them, in fact, with Fran, and maybe the Bordeaux, I think, was, in fact, sort of especially nice. But I'm completely enjoying this. And in fact, and I did not enjoy all the wines we had tonight with that. And so that certainly probably has a lot to do with that too also. Yep. Anything else?
No, that's it for tonight. I forgot to thank you for sacrificing or making the sacrifice to try the Snoop Dogg wine. I'm sure that was hard for you to have to try an extra wine tonight. So thank you for that.
Especially because, I mean, as I said, with having that and of course telling my class about it, because of course you're going to tell 21-year-olds about this. And so having done that, it's like, so I thought, it would be really fun to try, and I thought, we have obviously an extremely varied audience, and some people would probably try Snoop Dogg wines. Some people have no idea who Snoop Dogg is, and that's probably a good thing. And so, so that's fine. And so I thought that would be fun to do in there. I have a few other pictures there. That was that. Oh, this is in fact the picture, as someone mentioned about, though Evan is not in this picture. This is in fact the wine interns at Stoller. By the way, this is a good gig if you want to do this. These were in fact the interns. And so there they were stomping the grapes to give it a little bit of skin contact for 4 or 5 hours before the grapes then would go into sort of into the press, etc. So they would leave it together in there for a while. And so he sent me that today. In fact, he sent me sort of a minute video, which in fact I could not do, unfortunately, or couldn't show because it was just great. In fact, the guy in the back right who's sort of down In fact, it's from France, and he was having a great time sort of jumping all over the wine in the video. This is also from another Miamian who currently is doing an internship in Spain. And it was great. He sent me this, in fact, last week of one of the vines, in fact, at the winery he is at. But at the same time, he was going yesterday across the border to Portugal, and they were picking grapes in Portugal for the wine, or to make a couple barrels of wine that the interns were making. And so he was picking grapes to make his wine. Dave Scott, again, was a Miami alum, went to UC Davis, and in fact has done now he was in Patagonia previous to that, and other places. And so the wine world can be great fun. I thought, as I usually do, show you pictures of campus, and I thought I would show you some things going on. This, of course, is the information building that is going up where Swing Hall was, and it is huge, and it's going up very, very quickly. And there's got some really wonderful and interesting new technologies that are going into this building that will be wonderful for students in today. And so it really is great that we are doing that. And then this huge building will, of course, house the nursing, and will also be housing the speech and hearing clinic and many, many other aspects. And so this is what's going on down there behind what was, of course, the cab building. And so there on College or Campus Avenue with that. And I thought, since I showed you two big buildings, I would show you. In fact, it was great. This is one of my favorite groves over there on Western Campus, not far from Presser. And one of the many percussion groups was, in fact, busy pounding away over there in the grove. And so it really is. I didn't take the time to go over because the band was also practicing. So it's wonderful seeing the students in fact on campus enjoying this beautiful day while they in fact were learning their music. And of course, I was stuck in traffic, I'll be honest, but it shows you, in fact, that the very large trunk of the tree over to the right is, in fact, the sort of largest ash that is on campus, that, in fact, has been sort of saved against emerald ash borer. And, of course, the sort of Western College alumni building there over on Western, a beautiful part of campus that many of you, in fact, may remember. Finally, of course, I thought I always have to end on maybe a flower. This is ironweed, in fact, growing over my hillside, attracting butterflies, etc. And so this is, of course, one of the many wildflowers that you will see in and around Oxford today. Finally, I want to thank again Fran Kysela of Class of 80 of Kysela Pere Fils Imports. He and I talked. In fact, he actually did more about picking out these wines so that we could do a nice look at Bordeaux and everything like that. And then finally, thank you from me. And of course, thank you from the Miami University Alumni Association. It's always fun to do these, and think about all the lovely people that are out there listening to this. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jack. And I'm sorry, Fran, for pronouncing Kysela wrong. I really do apologize for that. I learned something new every wine tasting. Thank you, Jack. And thank you all for tuning in and joining us tonight. We had a lot of questions come in, so I apologize if we were not able to get to your question. I invite you to check out our other Alumni Association webinars. They are free and open to all. And we have a lot coming up in October and November, a lot of different topics being covered. Our webinars are also recorded, so you can go back and watch any of Jack's past wine tastings or any of the past webinars we have. And these can all be found on our webinar site at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. Yeah, Jack, sorry.
No, it's a problem, because I was going to say, in fact, it's quite lovely. Lovely alums who have become dear friends. And I will suggest this. I mean, that they very often, in fact, may not be able to watch that evening, but they will get the wines at a different point and come together with friends and then do the whole thing. And so it's nice to know that, it can continue on and that you can have a good time with friends.
Yeah, it feels similar. The only difference is you can't ask live questions, but exactly. Other than that, it feels pretty similar.
You can always text.
Yeah. You can always email me too, and I'll forward them to Jack.
Exactly.
So thank you again. I want to remind everyone that this weekend, or next weekend, is Miami's homecoming. It's the return of the homecoming parade on Saturday, October 8th, followed by a variety of alumni and student group tailgates. So we have like 15 different student and alumni groups tailgating on the Millette lawn. And then the game is that afternoon. So please, if you're in the area or want to travel in, we'd love to see you at homecoming. Again, that is October 7th, 8th, and 9th. And that's all we have. So thank you, Jack, and thank you to all of you that tuned in tonight.
Thanks. Take care, Emily.